Hi, I'm Angelo John Lewis and Sacred Inclusion Network, and I'm delighted to be talking with Bobby Austin, who's going to be facilitating our event on October 16th, our online community exploration. And for those of you that don't know about Bobby, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then I'll ask him some questions. Bobby is the president of something called the Neighborhood Associates Corporation, and he's a sociologist and author who's really spent his career strengthening the social fabric of urban neighborhoods. He held the General Hal G Chair on Contemplative Leadership at the Merton Institute, and is recognized for his work on American culture and public kinship. He's probably most well known for his leadership of the National Task Force on African American Men and Boys, which led to the report Repairing the Breach. And now he's involved with Neighborhood Associates, and he'll tell you a little bit about that in the course of our talk. Bobby, as I was saying, a lot of our folks that come to our events, these are spiritually oriented folks that have some social conscience, and I know many of them, including myself, struggle with a way to reconcile these two things. So I'm going to ask you questions kind of referring to that, but I thought it'd be useful for you to tell folks a little bit about your own sort of spiritual practice, or maybe your background, something like that. Yeah.
Sure. Well, background is always a good place to start, except if we understand that background is just that. It's the beginning, probably, of if you are wise, a lifelong learning experience in something. I can tell you where I began, and that might help you, it might not help you, but it would have, I can tell you I began my own spiritual life as a church organist and pianist when I was very, very young, and directed choirs and so forth. My grandfather founded a church in this little place in Kentucky. I didn't play at his church though, but so I have been involved in let's say the work of spiritual and spirituality all of my life. Now I've gone through a number of iterations and changes. I now am very much involved. I have been over the years. I'm not so much involved now with my church here in Washington, D.C., People's Congregational. And from that, we built a beautiful church, actual physical church, which is a very beautiful piece of architecture that speaks to the spirit of really of African American adventure in Christianity, and we think it's quite lovely, and people love it. Beautiful windows called the Singing Windows, which were designed by African American artist David Driscoll, who was a member of that congregation. I'm also a very strong Buddhist reader, and I like contemplative leadership. So that's where I am now. I have sort of commingled all of those things into one to fit my practice, and that's what you're asking about. It's no one else's. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else if they wanted to do it, but for me, I needed it because I found that I had a terrible incident many years ago, and I needed something to calm my mind, and I found through a doctor, a medical doctor that I was going to, who was a practicing Buddhist, that if I read, maybe this might help. And he was so right. I started to read various Buddhist writings, various writers, and really came out of it with one central thing, is that I had at that time a real monkey mind, just jumping all over the place, doing everything. And what I needed to do was to get into a corner, which I had done at that point, but I was in the fetal position, come out of that fetal position and read and contemplate my life, what had happened, who I was angry at and not angry at, and how to get over that, because I was only destroying me. And I will tell you, even though my Christian upbringing I love and I enjoy, and it gives me great comfort, it didn't touch my head and heart in the same way that these Buddhist readings did. I did not change. I just have commingled them all together. So now that's my practice. Is I do some good quiet time, contemplating what the day is about, what I am doing. I don't do it every day. When I feel myself getting completely harried, I took off all of August because I felt myself drowning, and I knew that I needed to take off and to think. And that's exactly what I did. I gave myself time to sit and to think and not to worry about everything else in the world, and say somebody else will pick that up for a while then I'll pick up the world after that. And it's a good thing. So that's my practice right there.
Yeah, that's a good introduction. It's an interesting mixture of sort of congregational Christianity and Buddhism, and it's interesting because more and more you have these kind of like mixtures I see with people. For whatever reason, whatever they came up with doesn't give them everything that they need, and so they get something else. It's just really
Right.
just sort of simple as that. And like you said, it's your own personal practice. It's not for everybody. Now, I've been kind of a student, that's a little bit strong, but I've been looking at your work around public kinship, which we're going to be talking about a lot. And one of the premises it seems to be built on, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have to start with some sort of self-examination before
Absolutely.
you can kind of engage in some of the pressing issues of the day, in terms of social justice, for example. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, and you talked about doing self-inventory. So what does that entail for somebody sort of on the path?
Well, I did a little book many years ago. I can't even think of the name of it as I sit here now, but in that book, we talked about taking the inward journey. And as I was sitting in my corner back quite, what, 15, 20 years ago, trying to figure out what I did wrong and what I was going to do right, it became obvious that leadership, as we are taught it, it can be very dangerous and very not very helpful. Mainly because the leader, the person who calls themselves a leader, uses self-anointed and has never done anything introspective about who they are. We've had some real examples of that recently in the national scene. So the point for me in public kinship is that in order to bring order to your own life and thinking, and this builds into what I call the moral mind, you have to sit and you have to go inward. Is there a specific rote ritual that you have to take? No. What you have to do, though, is be calm and to listen to your inward voice. And we all have them, whether we admit it or not. We're not crazy, but we have an inward voice. It could be your conscience. It could be something that your mother or father has said to you, and it comes back to you, and you say, I can't do that because the voices inside my head are saying, that's wrong. Bobby, that's crossing the line. That's not true. So it's like taking this introspective journey, inventory of yourself inside, and you collect all those and you think about those, and usually you will come out. I've talked to some people who say, I came out with this, and they will tell you what they came out with. I came out with, I don't want to be a leader of anyone other than myself. And that's how it might intersect with some of the work that you're doing. Because if you look at, and I think this is okay, if you look at the life and work, particularly that I'm familiar with, of Jesus Christ, it was precept and example. It wasn't shaking his finger in your face and saying, you gotta do this. It was, watch how I live, watch my example, see what I do. And that is the point with self-introspection and self-leadership. Is learning to lead yourself to good action. Because once you do that, you will lead yourself to good action. Few of us would have such demons inside of us that would lead us to bad actions, but probably are some. But if you look at it, you will see that When I sit and I think and I let myself just reflect on it, I can come out with a good action that I need to carry out, not someone else. And that's the big issue that I have with a lot of people. They want me to say, I said, no, 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 I can't tell you how to do that. I'm telling you how to start. And something inside you is going to tell you how to do this. And if not, we will build on that till we get to that point. That's how I see it.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask you
Mhm.
how you define this public kinship.
Public Kinship has about 8 different steps that I did because Americans want steps. They continue, they continue to want a step for losing weight and several steps for doing this. And so, and just to free think it, and it just doesn't resonate. So I have 8 different steps, and that's fine. I will tell you those, but it rests on one thing. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Now that's pretty religious in a sense, but if you go across any spiritual liturgy or a spiritual canon, there is in that work, treat your neighbor correctly as you would treat yourself. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Do good to the stranger. As, it's there. So it's like a bedrock somewhere that came to us that to do well for yourself and your life, you must do well by others, by the stranger. So that is where my work comes from. Now, public kinship sounds a little strained, and there's a reason. Everything is contextual to your growing up. I'm 70, almost 77, in your society. And I remember the times when I'm from Kentucky, where you would hear in the South, well, would you want your daughter to marry one? So I didn't want to bring up any ugly. And Black people do the same thing. We don't want to, they didn't want their children to marry whites either. So it was both sides saying, I want this, I want freedom, I want all these things, but I don't want this. I didn't want to get into that discussion at this point. I wanted to say, look, in a society such as ours, a democracy, a republic, we can have a civic and civil engagement that allows us to say we are fellow citizens, but more than that, because it's got to be deeper, that's where the spiritual comes in. We are fellow kindred along this journey of building democracy. Because if we don't feel akin to one another, it's not going to work. And let me give you an example. It's a very exaggerated example, but it is one that has happened, and we should discuss it. When two things. When the saints at Mother Bethel were shot by the young man in
Dylan Roof.
Yeah, Roof. I always don't like to call his name. I'm like that, but I shouldn't be that way. But Ruth, Dylan, I was absolutely captivated by 2 things. One, it was reported that on the way, after the police arrived and arrested him, on the way to the jail or to the courthouse, the police officers, were worried about his well-being and offered him to get him. They asked him if he was hungry, and they offered to buy him a hamburger, which he accepted. And that's all a very decent and a public kind of kinship thing that should always happen between policemen and people that they arrest. If this sounds odd to you, it's because they probably felt some relationship to that boy. Not that they condoned a thing that he did, but that he was a fellow human being of their group. I don't know what they made. They might have offered that to a young Black, Hispanic, Indian kid. I don't know. I doubt it. And it's not to cast aspersions. It's just, I doubt it. Now, where public kinship comes in is if they did that same humane thing for those who are not in their identification process like them. And I hope I'm being clear, because then when you turn in the same story, if you watched, and I did watch this, the families of those saints who were killed, they express many times grief, this definite heartbreaking grief. But almost to a man, I don't know whether they all did, and to a woman, they said, but I forgive you.
Yeah, that
I
was
forgive you
extraordinary. Yeah.
for what you did. I will not forget it, but I forgive you because I'm a Christian and I love every extraordinary example, public kinship. Now, put those two pieces together and say, why can't both of us do this simple thing in building our moral minds to say, I forgive you. I don't like what you did. It hurts me. It is killing me. But I forgive you for what you did. Those are two examples, fervent examples, simple examples, common people examples of public kinship and how it intertwines with the spiritual.
Mm. Yeah, it starts from the recognition that we're all human beings and we're part of a collective. And I guess maybe it's not so radical to some people, is that we depend on each other for the evolution of this collective thing. That's what we seem to have difficulty understanding as a race of people, a human race of people. Now, as you know, Bobby, a lot of your work addresses this. There's a lot of tremendous confusion and conflict that's going on, not just in the United States, but in the world right now. So I think that my sense in your work in public kinship is that there's some kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves before we can get to that place of kind of recognizing the other as we do the people that we love and are not other to us. What are the questions that we need to ask in order to approach this point of view?
Well, I have three, and I use them almost as since we're dealing in spirituality, as a catechism. Who am I? Who are they? And who are we? Now, if you can get through those questions, honestly, you have the answer. That's what I use. That's what I do. That's what I'm writing on now. Right now, I can't get it finished, but I'm going to finish it. But that's it. I mean, I ask myself, that's that self-introspection. Who am I? Who am I in all of this? Who am I to Angelo John Lewis? Who am I? Then I may have to say, hey, he's not in my group. So who are they? And we all have the who are they. Are they the ones that have come up out of great trials and tribulations and washed their garments in the blood of the Lamb? Or are they our enemies who we think are going to come and kill us and take our jobs? And they are awful, those others, those immigrants, because I don't know them. And I have not asked the question, who are they? Am I willing to listen? Do I want to hear? Because that's a big one right now in I think the world. We're in this particular chaos because in Europe, they are fighting in the streets. They have street fights now. Immigrants or migrants, what do you want to call them, are trying to come to the countries. They want to escape their own poverty or war or whatever. Same thing in our side of the world. And it's a big question, and it's a huge ball of confusion. That's one of our, if you remember that wonderful song, I think the Spinners or the Temptations, one of them, but a ball of confusion, and everything is sort of just rumbling right now. And it is about trying to figure out who they are. And if they are going to, what are they going to do to us or not do to us? Why is it that we think they're going to do something? See, that's the question. And we got to figure that out and work with it. And that's where public kinship finds its importance, in that who are they? And it's reaching out to find who are they. Now, at the end, public kinship is the last one. Who are we? And that is not only public kinship, that is the building of what I call a common culture, which frightens a lot of people. But if we don't build a common public culture that we can all attest to and agree to and live with, we are going to be fighting and killing each other over symbols and words for the rest of our grandchildren and their grandchildren's lives. It can be done if we take it seriously and we want to do it. But those are the three major questions that I always deal with. Who am I? Because I'm first. I got to know myself. Who are they and how do I define them? And who are we? Because in the final analysis, I, they, and we've got to find a way to, in Dr. King's words, understand that this is, we do have a common destiny, and we will either live together or die together.
Yes, amen. Now, as you know, the reason we're doing this is because you're doing this thing on the 16th, and I haven't figured out what to call it, but I've got your description that your associates send me. I figure out something clever to call it. But people that what might they expect to engage with Bobby Austin when we talk about this public kinship thing?
Well, we will certainly engage in those three questions because they're simple and they don't require that you go out and get a dictionary or an encyclopedia and try to figure it out. In reading so many things I like, and so many people who are very good, I find after it takes me too long to comprehend and get through the jargon, and I'm not stupid. It's just that I feel sometimes that's a waste of time. I had a professor and I was at Fisk, and he once told me more than once, write it so your mama can understand it. And what he meant was, stop giving me all this stuff, Austin. Give me something I can understand. And I didn't like it when I was young. But I understand it now. I understand very clearly. I understood it very clearly then after I was so. And that is something simple, not necessarily clever, but simple, understandable, that we can all answer and live with and ask ourselves without forgetting it on a daily basis. And if we do that, we approach situations in that way, and we can approach them in ways that allow us to build a moral mind. And we haven't talked about that, but the moral mind is one that I'm working on. It's very difficult even for me to come up with, but let's put it like this. I see the moral mind as this way of thinking. I am more and more reading things about the mind and consciousness and thinking, that a moral mind is built out of the ideas and the words and the thoughts that we have. And if they are immoral and bad and dangerous, that's the kind of mind we come up with, and that's how we see everybody. If we can take that sensibility and build in around our internal life good words, good thoughts, inquisitive ideas about who these people are. And I have to do that for myself. Let me tell you why I have to do that. Sometimes I look at people and I'm like, yeah, ooh, Bobby, watch yourself, you don't know who that person is even, when I was first doing African-American men and boys stuff, I would come across young men, and I'd want to say, straighten up, pull your pants up, all these things I wanted to say. I did it sometimes, and then I stopped. And then I was always in a quandary. Should I have said something? Was that my prerogative as an adult, as a mature adult, to say, you're not going to get far in life like that? And then well, maybe they will, because then they look at these rap singers who have become, phenomenal superstars. But I think as that arc is going up and is coming down, they're seeing the tragedy of many young people who tried to follow that, shall we say, that star life, ending up in tragedy. Because that's what it is. It's a star life. It's very synthetic. It is built on controversy. It is built on using people's imaginations and their minds, but to good action, to good order. I don't always think so. I think it has been, it's infectious music. It is clever. It is brilliant. And as you see, I tried to use it in our report where I could, because it's very thoughtful in many ways. But many people, young people, don't always sit and think in the same ways that an older person. That's just the music they're dancing to and they're having a good time. And so they're calling people this kind of name and that kind of name. And they're not thinking that you're forming a picture in your head mentally of what that girl is. And so that is what I object to. But that is why I think you have to build a moral mind yourself. Now, I will talk about that because I think that is what we all have to do. It's not just young people, adults, adults, whites, blacks, this whole issue of how do we perceive the other? And in the building of that moral mind, the language that we create in our heads and then that we speak that allows us to do good action. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying.
Yeah, it's yeah, I love that you're investigating what exactly moral means. It's almost like a word we don't use, and we
No.
probably should use. You know, when we're talking about the collective, we are inevitably talking about how we morally engage with one another. And if we don't understand that, we can't really advance in terms of being a good collective.
And I think many times, most of us, include me, I'll use myself first. I hate to say it because I've done so many things that were not moral. Or I don't think I'm any paragon of virtue. So I'm afraid somebody say, what you did, so and so. So your mind tells you, you did this. It's a heavy burden to carry. And yet, I think we have to say that we're flaking out if we don't start to discuss it in some ways. And more, I guess, in the way of a Thomas Merton discusses it. I mean, I love Thomas Merton and I love his work, and he is the best example of who are they. He gives this wonderful example in Confessions of a Guilty Bystander. You read that wonderful book, and he says he's on the corner of 4th and Walnut. If you know Louisville, Kentucky, that's a major business area, and he somehow looks up at the people who are like at this crossroads of this major city, all kind of people, all color, and he says, you know what? These are all my people. I am one of these people. They are a part of me, and he claims them as one of his people, his group. The they becomes we. And in that moment, he sees morally, these are and he says it, these are my people. I claim them as mine. That is what we need to talk about and to do. And Merton, if you don't have that book, maybe in our discussion, we may even discuss that because I think your people would find that interesting. Merton speaks to all across, I think, the religious genre. I think people resonate to his work. I know I do, and I think many others do as well.
All right, so just to let people know, we're doing this on October 16th, Saturday, 11 o'clock Standard Time. I will put the link in the show notes and probably in the podcast so you can see it. I hope you join us. Bobby, it's a pleasure to talk, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say in a couple of weeks.
Well, I do appreciate it, and I thank you for having me, and you're doing a great service and a great cause. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.